Greetings! In this video we will create the assembly portion of our animation. We'll do two versions. If you are creating an animated GIF, a 512 square, we probably don't want to do more than about 200 frames. So we'll create our initial assembly from frame 0 to 70. Then we'll do a second part of the video where we'll create it at full frame, 1920 by 1080, and we'll do 300 frames. That'll give us more time to create the assembly at the beginning of the animation. But let's get started with our 512 animated GIF version. And this is somewhat of a non-standard lesson in that geometry is rarely keyed directly after a rig has been created. The rig is what is animated, and in this case, just a quick review, we've got three joints. We animated our rotor joints, and then we have a transform node for translate and rotate specifically. And that's where our keys currently sit. But we are going to animate from frame 0 to 70, these pieces coming together as if they're individual bricks and plates. So just once again, this animation starts at 70 and then is out of the frame by 200. I've got a camera created, and it is a 512 square currently, and you'll recall that we selected the camera and the aim, and we have that locked down. We locked it down by selecting the attributes, right-clicking, and saying lock selected. And if we need to unlock it, when we change the dimension we'll need to unlock it, we come to that there, unlock selected. All right, let's get started. As I mentioned, this is somewhat non-standard in that we're going to be keying the geometry that is part of a rig. Now, in this particular view, I only have polys available to me. It says show polys, and nothing else is on, and so I can draw a bounding box. My ground plane is referenced on this layer here, so I don't also select that. And our animation begins at 70, so we want this to be fully assembled. So we'll set a key, and we'll actually key in reverse, something else that's a little bit unique about this project. So I have all of my geometry selected. You can take a look here in the outliner. I have only my poly surfaces selected. And make sure that panel's active, and I'm going to hit S on the keyboard. So at frame 70, all of these pieces are assembled, and you can verify that the animation of your rig still works. And now we're going to work in reverse from 70 down to 0, and we'll key these out of the view. Right, so at 70 they're in position, and that just means that at a frame before that, let's say 55, we'll pull this out of the view. So at 55 I've removed the rotor, just translated it up, and we'll hit S on the keyboard. So from 55 to 70 that comes down. Now you want to block, you want to get your translations first, and then you can come back and if you wanted to rotate. If you want to put two windows side by side, that wouldn't be a bad idea for some of this that comes off of the view. And we'll just make sure that this is also only polys. So I'm moving around in this view, and we'll be looking out of the camera in this view. And we have our resolution gate on in this camera view here. And I did that so that I'm still at frame 55, but let's say we rotate those three pieces, and we'll hit S on the keyboard. And now when we scrub through, we'll make that active, right? They're coming in and assembling, and maybe we want this piece a little bit below. Pull out, and let's take a look at both. So right, we're rearranging at 55, we're going to pull that down, and let's pull these up a little bit, just so that the objects aren't penetrating each other. So we blocked those positions, right? And then we've come back, and at 55 we've been making some subtle changes. So those pieces come down, right? They come down and land right in place. Now we need to make sure that as it assembles, that the pieces that snap together are already in place. So by, let's say, 65, I want this piece to already be assembled there. So I'm going to set a key for this post. Now from 65 to 70, there's no movement. We just went ahead and blasted all of those at once and gave them all a key at 70, so we were sure that they were in place. We've set another key here at 65, so this piece will be in place already. And let's say we come back another 15 frames, and we can pull that up and we'll set it, and then we can check that. And then as I mentioned, we're keying the translate, and then you can come in and, right, I'm going to key back over 50. Let's say we rotate that piece upside down so that it comes in spinning. And then I'm keying over it. And I need to raise it up a little bit. You can see there. We'll raise that up a little bit. Now they're penetrating in out of the view, but that's okay. The viewer isn't going to see that penetration. And we'll just make sure, so that comes down into place, those pieces come down. And we'll just go in reverse order. So this tail piece, let's say that is in, yeah, we can just have that start at 70, so we'll come to 55, and let's pull that up, and we can see that works. And if you wanted to rotate that around, right, come back in and just key over the top. You could do the rotation right when you set the key the first time, but I think it's helpful to kind of block the translate first and then come back and give it some interest with the rotation. Let's say that those pieces need to be in place by about, let's say, 65 as well. So we'll pull this one out, this rotor, and I'll set a key at 65. Let's say we come forward 15, and oops, I did that. We want to key it at 65 and then pull back to 50. Sorry about that. And we'll pull that out. So at 50, it's off the screen. At 65, it's in place. And then there's a pause between 65 and 70. And of course, you could do something fun like have it rotate as it's coming in. And we'll set that key. And so that's comes in and begins to rotate. And then when the animation begins, it rotates the other way. Let's say at 65, that's there. So at 60, this one would need to be in place. So we'll set that key. And since this one needs to come up under, I'm going to go back 5 frames and just lower it. And then here we'll do our full 15. And we can pull that out. And we'll set it. And then you can check that out. And we're just going down. So this would need to be in place before that snaps together. So at 55, let's say this is in place. We'll set it, and I'm just going to breeze through this quickly, not worry too much about the rotation, but you can come back in after the fact and create some more interest. Just for the sake of time, I'll make this quick. So let's say by 52 here, this needs to be in place. We'll come forward, and let's say that comes at a slight angle, make that window active, so that piece comes in. And right, if you wanted to come over and give it an intermediary frame, you could do that. Now, we're running out of frames in this direction. Again, we're limiting ourselves to 200 total frames. And in the second part of the video, we'll have some more flexibility in here, but let's assume that those pieces are all going to just work together, be together by 50. We'll come to frame 30, and I'll do these individually. Let's pull that one all the way back. I'll set it. Let's say this one is coming from above. We'll say this one is coming from above, but a little bit forward, and then we'll have this one completely out of the view forward. And so those pieces come together. Let's have this raised a little bit. And we'll check that out. All right, and so this would just mean we need this piece to be by right about there. That should be in position. And so I'll grab all 3 of these and we'll set that. We'll move forward, and let's say this one, I'm going to pull that up and then pull it back. So we're starting off with 3 frames with this one. It comes in and then assembles. Likewise with these 2 pieces. Let's say that, right, it's in place at 45, but I'm going to raise that up. So from 35 to 45, it's lowering. And then let's say at 20, it's just straightforward. And if you wanted to, right, I mentioned I was just going to block this out, and you can come in and do these separate. But here's a good candidate. We'll have these separated a little bit so that they don't appear as a unit. We'll grab this one, right? And we can again say this needs to be in place by about here. So we'll set that key, and let's see, we'll have this one come laterally. So this comes in and lays down. Let's say this piece here, and pull that up, and then at, let's say, frame 5. So again, we're running out of frames. We're going to make sure that this is all assembled. Almost there. This needs to be in place by about there. And I'm just going to pull this straight up. Oh no, we can't do that, right? Because that's penetrating. So very good. I'll pull that forward, and we'll have it come in from this angle. So we don't want any penetration to take place in the view, right? We've got plenty of penetration, the object's sitting in the same place when they're out of view, but when it comes in, we want it to really appear as though this is being assembled. All right, getting close here. We've got these pieces here. Actually, let's just get all of these. And we'll say that needs to be assembled. Those pieces need to be assembled by about 25. And then let's have each of these just come in from a different position. Push that out. Make sure it doesn't penetrate. And we could even, right in this view, maybe slide it over, give it an angle. So that's coming in. Makes it just in time. And then we said these pieces here. I'm going to grab these two, and let's say at 10, we'll pull those out. And then let's give them a little bit of separation, right? Here's our second windows coming in handy here. We'll move this one over. And let's say by about there, it's kind of lined up. We can do the same with the other. We'll set it there, but then at 10, we'll have to start further over. So if you look at these two, right at 10, they're out. You come close together and then assemble very close. Do the same thing on the other side. Yeah, we'll just pull those out, and then, as I mentioned, you can separate. Now they're, yeah, that's good. I missed that piece on our initial, so that needs to be in place there. I'm just going to pull that down, and we'll pull it out. So that comes in and comes up, and then we've got just a few more pieces before we're done with this first version. We'll set that, let's say, just coming down. Now, is it penetrating there? Yeah, it is a little bit, so we'll pull it forward. In this view, just making sure that as they fall into place, they're not penetrating. And then we'll grab these two, and we're just about done. And just for time's sake, I'm going to pull those just straight forward. You can spend the time to separate them, rotate them. Yep, and then we'll grab these final two, and they need to be in place, right? They need to be in place by about there. So I'll set a key, and then we can just go ahead and pull those out of the view at the very start. So these will be the first two things that come in because we've been animating in reverse. So now we'll take a look here, right at frame 0. There's no geometry in the scene, completely blank scene, and we see all of those assemble. And then at frame 70, the rig, our initial rig, takes over, and we've got that animation. All right. So if you followed along for that 512 version, be sure to save that. I'm going to save this and we'll be back in the second part of the video and I'll get you set up for the longer version. Be right back. Welcome back. So we created a small version for an animated GIF and we did that over the course of 200 frames. Now we're going to give ourselves 300 frames and prepare for a full high definition render that you would create an MPEG movie from. Let's give ourselves the additional frames, but before we do that, we're going to delete that initial assembly because we'll have more time, and this would be a more detailed version that you would include in your portfolio. So you want to take more time to create that assembly. So we're going to get rid of that existing 0 to 70 frame assembly animation. I've drawn a bounding box, and note if I hit the Shift plus, I don't have any of my rigs selected. I don't have translate, rotate. I don't have any of the 3 joints selected. I only have my geometry. And we're going to delete that animation. We're going to come up to Edit, Delete by Type Channels. Edit, Delete by Type Channels. Note that the word keyframe doesn't appear there. Deleting the channels gets rid of your keyframe animation. And note that I haven't selected Delete All by Type. That would then also delete my rigged animation, which we want to maintain. So we're coming to Edit, Delete by Type Channels. And now if you scrub, right, all that hard work we just did is gone. Obviously you've saved it out as a separate file. But we got rid of that, and so we're back to the beginning. And of course you could have just opened that beginning project. Now we want to select our animation and shift it down. As I mentioned, we're going to give ourselves 300 frames here, 0 to 300. And we're going to shift this down. And we want to select what's animated on our rig. So that's the translate. I'll shift select the rotate, and you can see the keys there, the red lines in the time slider. We'll use the command key. Recall that there's actually no animation on our joint 1, and then we'll select joint 2. So we've got translate, rotate, and then our 2 rotor joints. We'll open the graph editor, and you can hit the F key. If your infinity's on, that's a little bit distracting to have the infinity on, so we can go ahead and turn that infinity off. We're just turning it off visually. And you can hit your little rectangle here or hit the F key. And we're going to select all of that animation. So that's my translation, my rotation, joint 3, and joint 2. And with my move tool and my middle mouse button, we're just going to shift this down. Right, I'm holding the shift key in my middle mouse button, and we're going to pull it down till it ends at 300 rather than 200. And you should see a 194 if you've been following exactly with me here. And then of course you can click off and then just pick one of those keyframes at the end and make sure that it's on 300. And if it wasn't, you could just select everything, right? Shift and right, shift key, middle mouse button allows us to scrub back and forth. And that wasn't too difficult to lay that down. So now our animation begins not at frame 70, but at frame 170. Right? So here is that animation that takes off. The other thing we want to do for our full frame is in the render settings, change our output, right, to HD 1080, right here, 1920 by 1080. That changes our composition. And so let's come back. I'm going to minimize our rig here. Click the plus next to camera group and aim. And I'm going to select both those because, well, that actually did work out. Sometimes, right, you'll need to recompose. And if we were going to recompose, I would select all of those, come and say unlock. Now I could move. But as I said, that was fortunate that we didn't have to make any changes. If you did, you can make those changes, and then once you have it, once everything is in the view, you can lock it. Now, we could set keys on the camera. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that. We can have these two selected, and I'm going to set a key here at 300, and that's good, right about there. So at 220, I'm going to set a key, and then let's say at 120, when everything is assembled, let's have that a little more centered. So at 140, the camera's there, and then it pulls out, and we see the flyaway. So just once again, set that in reverse. I set a key at 300. I'm setting keys on the camera and the camera aim. Came to 220, so there's no movement there. And then at 220 to 140, zoomed in a little bit, centered that. And yeah, we can just set that at the beginning. So very subtle camera movement. I'm an advocate for first semester, second semester students really being minimalist as it pertains to camera animation. You want people to recognize the subject and not necessarily your camera animation. That's just kind of a standard practice for beginners, but that's a nice, real subtle camera movement there. All right, and then now we're ready to get back to our animation, right? We can come to 140, excuse me, let's come back to our translate. At 170 is when our rotor starts at 170. Yes, we shifted it down 100 frames. Our animation here starts at 170. And just as we did in the previous section of the video, we can select all of our geometry, right? Only polys are available to me. And at 170, we'll set a key. And then now we're free to go back and go through that same process. And I'm not going to do it here with you, just get you started. So again, 140, we could pull this up. Give ourselves 2 frames side by side, make this one our perspective, make this one our camera, and we've got our resolution gate here. Maybe we'll pull this a little bit to the left. So here's our working camera. And as I mentioned, right, at 140, let's pull those up a little bit. And we could even have this one spin, make this panel active, and right, you can scrub through there and see that coming together. I'll do a few more, but it is essentially the same, right? We've got that at 170, let's say at 130. Same workflow, I should say. Right, so that comes in. And we recall that this one was coming up. And that's the process. It will be a little bit easier to watch, a little bit more of an opportunity to create some interesting animations for because we have more frames and it's easier for the viewer to see. It's because it's a little bit slower. Let's say we have this kind of coming in at an interesting angle, right? So in this view, it's spinning around and then comes up. Likewise with this piece here, maybe we have it rotating as it comes in, just keying over that original position. Yeah, and go through that exact same process, and then you'll be rendering full frame. Quick review, right? We've got our helicopter. You would title it name.number.extension. We're going to go from 0 to 300 on this full def. Make sure you have the camera selected, and we've got high def 1080, 1920 by 1080. And because we're rendering in Arnold, we'll use render sequence. All right, questions in the discussion forum. Have a good one.